Hi, everyone. It's Rebecca Piazza here, and I'm interviewing today JJ Reichenbach.
Hey
Hello, JJ.
everybody. Hi, I'm Becca.
So, JJ is a close personal friend of mine. She's actually my editor for my books, and she does editing for quite a few people in the Calgary community and all over the place. I don't even know where all of your collectibles come
Everywhere.
from. Everywhere, yeah.
Everywhere.
In today's digital world, it could be literally anywhere, Abu Dhabi,
Exactly.
wherever. So she's a close personal friend, and she's actually launching her book for the Nyx series this Tuesday through Owl's Nest Books. And thank you very much for coming and talking with me. So
Absolutely.
let's dive right in. Okay. Tell us a little bit about the Nyx series as a whole.
Okay, well, if you haven't heard of it before, I'm releasing right now a book called Insatiable Nyx. It's going to be the third book, third and final of the trilogy. Uh, it's the basic premise of this series is demonic possession from a demon's point of view. So it's funny if you have a really twisted sense of humor like I do, and it's pretty dark and gory. You have to really be a pretty hardcore horror fan to be into it. But if that's your genre, then here we go.
I love this series. It's so fantastic. You know, it's funny. Before I had kids, I was a hardcore horror fanatic. Once I had kids, life is just too sad. I just can't. I love horror films, and every time I see and books and all that, and every time I see a trailer for something, whether it's a book or a movie or a snippet that comes up, I'm always like, oh my God, I gotta go see it. It's gonna be so good. And I just cannot bring myself to doing the movies anymore. But the books
Yeah,
I'll still read.
yeah. You still read my stuff.
I love your stuff, of course. It's my kind of sick humor.
And you write some pretty dark, twisted stuff yourself, Missy.
Yeah, but I still think that scene with the Drano in, I think that was
Really
in the
stuck with
first
you.
Nyx book,
Yeah, that was the first one.
that took the cake. If you guys haven't read it, you definitely have to read it. The first book is phenomenal. It sets it up really, really well for the series. The second book I found was more like playful, and it's my personal favorite only because it involves a circus and like a carnival kind of thing and clowns, and I hate clowns. I'm terrified of clowns.
They're scary. That's why I
They
avoided
are,
them.
especially the one from your book. But I don't know, there was something really playful about it. But and then the third book that I had the privilege of beta reading,
Mm,
and I know it's changed a little tiny bit from where it was
I love
um
it.
with editing, but it was, I don't even know,
Cannibalistic.
cannibalistic goodness, I guess.
Lots of cannibalism, lots of gore.
But like the right dose of cannibalism.
There is such thing as too much, yeah, and you do want to like ride that line.
Yeah. Um so what kind of things can we expect in the third book that maybe didn't take place in the first two?
Oh, okay. Well,
I'm
I'm gonna
putting you on the
try to
spot.
do this without too much spoilers. The third book, we come in right after on the tail end of the second book. The first book was initially meant to be a standalone, and then I had a good response. So I'm like, I'll write a sequel. And so I wrote the sequel, but I couldn't finish the whole story in that one, so I kind of left it on a cliffhanger, which wasn't very nice of me. And then now I'm finally finishing it, so wrapping up the story. And I think that's the one thing that you can really expect most of is everything gets wrapped up in this book. So that includes, Nyx. Nyx is the demon, her character arc, the character arcs for all the paranormal hunters that she gets mm, wrapped up with. you know, uh, she seems to get herself into a lot of trouble through no fault of her own.
Of course.
And in this one, it really wraps up all of that trouble that's been building over the course of three books.
Yeah. And you know, it's funny when you say she gets herself in trouble with no fault of her own, because it's really true in this book. The first two, I think she would have argued that she didn't do anything, that just stuff
She
happened
would
and she has
argue
no
that.
idea. But she was totally responsible for everything, well, for most of
100%.
it.
She's always
But
responsible,
in
but
this
she
last
does
book,
not like to face that.
yeah, but in this last book, it really was that it was no fault of her own. It was just
Stuff happened.
stuff happened, and
It's just like, why do I have to deal with this? It's not my fault. It's not, but it is. It's not her fault, but it is her problem.
Yeah, yeah,
So
exactly.
she has to deal with it.
Yeah.
And part of her character arc was really coming to terms with the fact by the very end that yes, she was responsible for many of the circumstances in her life, and she couldn't just throw that responsibility off on everybody else. She had to face the facts, face up to her role in how things play out, and just sort of come into her own in a way.
Yeah, it's a good way of putting it.
Mature
And
after many centuries as a demon.
well, yeah. Um, so I had a couple questions, and one of them I know I gave to you, and we'll talk about that afterwards. I actually came up with another question, which I'm totally putting you on the spot. Okay, so Nyx is a demon who possesses hosts,
Yes.
and that's kind of she can exist without a host, but she can't really do anything if she doesn't have a host, from what I'm
Yeah.
understanding.
Yeah. Do you want me to give like a little explanation of it
Yeah, definitely.
for review? So, the way that I've set up the world building with this one is we have this demon, this non-corporeal demon entity of Nyx, and she can inhabit human bodies for varying periods of time. The length of time that she can inhabit a human host depends on how good of a fit they are for each other. So if they're a really good fit, then she can stay for a few months, at most a couple, 3 or 4 months, I would say. And if it's a terrible fit and she's just like not a good match with them, then it can be a few days. And what happens is her hosts start to degrade and die and fall apart. And the first part of them that starts to go is their soul, like their light kind of starts to get snuffed out by her, which is a problem for her because she can't really exist in a host without at least some tiny, tiny spark of that light. That's what keeps the body alive, which is what keeps her alive. So even though she can jump into a host that's like freshly dead, if there's still like a little spark of consciousness left over, she can't stay in that for very long because it would fall apart. And she can't just inhabit a dead body that's just been lying there dead. She can't inhabit animals or anything. I've seen some cool movies where you could, and that would be an idea, but in this case, she doesn't. So she has to kind of cycle through hosts pretty regularly. And she's always trying to find a host that's a great fit, even though she knows that even in those cases, she can't stay for long, right? So that's kind of how the world building is set up for her. And she can jump bodies at will. The only things there are a variety of things in her world that can keep her from doing so. For example, one of the characters has a special amulet that keeps her out, and she can even be kept locked in a host. That's what the second book kind of centers around. Uh, Certain magical objects could keep her locked in a host against her will, and part of her story is like maneuvering around that and trying to stay alive without the host dying on her.
And the good old salt line, that's always my favorite.
Yes, she hates
A
salt.
salt circle,
The
that's
worst condiment.
yeah, exactly. It's the typical. So my question is, okay, so Nyx, it becomes pretty clear throughout the books, through with various people, that Nyx becomes attached to certain hosts. She just gets a little fondness for them, and she won't
She does.
really. I don't know if she would like straight out admit it.
No, she doesn't like to admit a lot of
Except
things
except for the
about
little
herself.
girl Callie, she will straight out admit that she loves Callie, and she would stay with her
She does
forever if
love
she could.
Kelly.
Um, but so she gets attached to certain hosts. Do you think this attachment, because Nyx is essentially like she's a demon, she's essentially evil, really. Um, so do you think this attachment is part of the human condition rubbing off from her because she's inhabiting humans? Or do you think it's like bits of her humanity coming back? Or is it just one of those things that happens when you like borrow something that you like?
For in her case specifically, it's the second thing that you suggested. She was originally a human centuries and centuries ago in like ancient Greece. She was a human. She had a family and a community and a little sister. And even though when she was transformed into a demon, she lost that body that she was born into, she still has the memories of that past life, really, even though she's had so many lives in between. So for Callie specifically, that's the 9-year-old that Nyx inhabits in the first book, and this girl plays a role in the books moving forward and through the series. And she specifically loves Callie because Callie reminds her so much of her little sister. And at points in the series, she doesn't necessarily acknowledge or admit that to herself, but she has this internal compulsion, like keep her safe no matter what, right? So even though she's, technically possessing this little girl, which is terrible, and the little girl is suffering because of it, she's also a really good match with Callie. Like they get along, and she's possessing her in many ways because she wants to keep her safe, and she sees that she's in a bad situation, and she's like, I'll help you by slowly killing you and draining your life energy. So she has a messed up way of getting there, but in many ways her intentions are good for certain people. At least for Callie. For other people, she just wants to kill them. She does.
They're just convenient, some of them.
Yes, it's just convenient. Most of her hosts are hosts of convenience.
Yeah. So in this third book, I'm hoping I'm not going to give too much away, but I think you've said it already, that there's an element of cannibalism.
Definitely,
Very big
that's no
element.
spoiler. Yeah.
Yeah, but I don't know if that's necessarily a spoiler. I think you've come right out and said that.
Yeah.
So we're talking horror, which when there's horror, I know we've had a conversation just in the editing process. When there's horror, there's certain things that you have to be careful about putting in because of
it's a lot, actually.
There's quite a few, but
yeah.
Something like cannibalism, is that something you have to be careful, like certain elements of it that you have to be careful writing about, do you think?
I think it depends, and part of the way that I handled this, and eventually, I don't think when I started out with the series, like when I was a new writer just starting my first book, right, I don't think I put as much thought into it as I do now. And the way that I've managed this situation, this new book, is by being very clear that there's like, this is going to be gory, and if that's not your thing, then you'll know that by reading the back of the book. You'll have an indication of it immediately when you see the cover. There's like a guy with blood coming out of his mouth. You're like, okay, so we can expect blood. That's important to know. And then my first sentence, first chapter, kind of immediately jumps right into the cannibalism. And the purpose of that is that, if you're in a bookstore and you're flipping through it, then you might check out that first page. On Amazon, you can see the first 10% of any book for free, basically, just to see if you're interested in it or not. And in this case, with Insatiable Nyx, I wanted everyone to be super clear up front. There's going to be a lot of cannibalism. If that's not your thing, cool. You didn't listen, keep walking. Put the book down. It's all good. No judgment here. And if that's your thing, then wow, welcome to the party, because you're gonna love this. We got lots of gore, lots of violence, lots of detailed description. I think it's important to, like we were saying, like present that up front so the reader knows what they're getting into. And in many ways, that is the style of the series. So if you're into reasonably extreme gore, I would say, then that could be up your alley.
I really, and I know we've discussed this before in the past as well, I really think it's funny how in the writing community and as a writer, you have to be conscious about all these things. Like I know even with my books, you said, the first 10% because it's an Amazon pre-read, and it was things I never thought about. But I think
think about them at first, right?
Well, but I just think it's funny that you have to consider that kind of stuff, because for something like your book, you're up front right off the bat. The book is about demonic possession from the demon's point of view.
Yes.
This isn't going to be the kind of book that you go to thinking everybody's going to be hugging puppies.
But Rebecca, I cannot tell you how many times I've been at signings and stuff, and people have come up to me, and I have the books displayed. I've got the poster. The posters are like pretty dark, and they come up to me, and the first thing I say is always like, "Hey, do you love horror? Like, do you love the horror genre?" And if the answer is no, cool, have a great day. And if the answer is yes, then we can have more of a conversation about what kind of horror you might love. But I cannot tell you how many times people come up to me trying to get a book for their child, and I'm like, oh, okay, how old is your kid? And they're like, 7. Like, no, hard pass. They should not be reading this. I shouldn't have to do the parenting for you.
I just don't understand.
It's almost never going to be for children unless you're looking at like R.L. Stine books, in which case go to the teen section, go to the children's section. But if you're in the horror section, no, this is not for children. And I try to be super clear, but you can never be too clear. Is my
Yeah.
theory behind all of this.
Well, and I feel like this, and it's a problem across everything, I feel. Like
Yes.
movies
Yeah, it's
and
important.
books, and because I mean, I don't know if it's less research is being done. Like even for example, Harry Potter. I mean, it's no secret my daughter and I are head over heels in love with Harry Potter. We may not agree with everything that J.K. Rowling says or does, but the books themselves
But
we
hey, the
really, really
books, the
like.
story, excellent, right?
But the story, if you look at it, it's pretty freaking horrific. I
Yeah,
mean,
there is some dark
I
parts,
remember being
especially
at
as
one of
Harry grows older, right? And then it gets a
oh,
little darker with
it's
him. With
dark. And
him.
even the beginning though, like the premise of the story is that it's a boy whose parents were
I've been
brutally
murdered.
murdered, and
Yes.
then he was a like attempted murder on him, but
Yeah.
he just happened to live, and then he ends up living with this horrible family that she's related to, but a
Yes, this
horrible
abusive
family
family.
who just they literally make him sleep under the stairs. Like it's the
Oh.
worst situation. And then and then he goes to school and every single year he doesn't even graduate. Like he doesn't even graduate.
Poor
He
guy.
every single year this psychopath is trying to kill him. That's the entire premise of the story. And other stuff happens and fairies and goblins and blah blah blah. But I mean, it's like that's the premise. And the amount of times that I would read it and just be gobsmacked by, it's very adult this, plot
Yeah,
just
and a
wrapped in a
lot of
kid discussion.
YA is these days.
Oh man. But I
And
wonder
but
if it
like
was
a
like that back then. I wonder if like if you were to take these genres and the situation 50 years ago, I wonder if people still question, they saw horror and went, "Oh, I wonder if it's okay for my kid." I don't think they would have. I think this is a fairly
oh,
contemporary issue.
yeah, that's a good point. Because um, yeah, like I've been told for YA books, the classification comes from how old the protagonist is. Um,
Yeah.
well, the narrator really, because you can have an adult narrator talking about their history when they're a child, but then that would still be more of an adult book because they have an adult perspective looking back,
Right.
compared to like a child or young adult teenager from a teenager's point of view. Then you'd be in the YA genre. And so in my books, it's a little hard to classify because Nyx is centuries year old, right?
Yeah.
She's would that be? I don't know, but it's
Well,
definitely
and
not
she's
YA.
possessing a 9-year-old, she's possessing an older.
Yes, at one
It's
point
really
she's
hard.
possessing a 9-year-old. Most of the book she's possessing like a 19 to 20-year-old
Yeah.
woman, who is not looking at it from a teenage point of view, but is still a little like it's sort of a coming of age for that one character in the book. But
I'm
no
sorry, I'm
matter how
thinking
you
of
look
coming
at
of
it,
age for Nyx. Oh my god.
no matter how you look at it, like it's not YA, it's not for kids,
No.
and it's not even necessarily for grown-ups either. Like it has to be. I'm really big on only advertising my stuff to the people that I have reasonable belief that they're actually going to enjoy
And
it.
that
So
makes
like if
sense.
someone only reads, sweet romance and stuff, then that's awesome. You do you, right? Like live your life, but maybe don't read this book.
Yeah.
At the same time, if you love supernatural or American Horror Story or the Conjuring movies, stuff that's like pretty down and gritty, then yeah, you're probably going to enjoy this too. So come join my club.
Yeah. I have to say I did enjoy too, and I know it's a pretty typical thing with horror, but it was like the romance aspect that you could infer in your novels is
Theoretically,
is
yeah.
it theoretically is pretty screwed up, which
Well, it is. And the thing that's weird for
yeah.
me as the author of it, because I did not start out intending to show any romance in it at all. Like technically there are love scenes in the first one that get pretty
Yeah.
explicit, but I'm like, no, no, this is horror. This is someone coming psychologically undone, being traumatized and tortured. That is not love. That is not romance. Should not be misconstrued as such.
Yeah.
Like it's really dubious, and it's meant to be screwed up because it's horror. And I just like fully leaned into, yeah, this is horror. Let's make it really messed up. So at no point did I even consider like people might be thinking about these relationships that technically happen as like romantic relationships. I guess I should have. I guess I was
But I think
naive
it's
of me, but then
but I
it's
think it's fantastic though with that there is some I don't know if romance is quite the term,
Well, it wasn't supposed to be romance.
No, I don't think it's quite the term, but like, and I don't want to
You know
say
what the
carnal
funny thing
attraction or
is?
anything. I'm thinking between Rachel and Elliot.
And Elliot, yeah, which
Like that's
for
pretty messed up.
viewers who don't know, yeah, and the reason it's messed up is because it's a taboo relationship. Like
Yeah.
they're not technically related, but they do have the relationship of like brother and sister because they've been adopted into this hunter family, and then they all go hunting. And it's like a very insular family that has had a messed up upbringing, so they don't have a clear understanding, I don't think, from their character's perspective of what the world could look like if it wasn't messed up from their point of view,
Yeah.
what relationships are supposed to look like, or what a healthy relationship could possibly look like, because they've never experienced that. So they have this like twisted thing going on between them, and the point of that was to, throw a little taboo into your horror because that makes it even worse. That makes it even grosser, more gory, and the
Yeah.
reader's supposed to be disturbed by it. And I think some readers were like too disturbed, and
You started out
they're
too
like, It's
disturbed. It's
horror, man,
fine.
like whatever." But it's supposed to be messed up and disturbing. And then other readers were like, oh, okay, so they have this romantic relationship. I'm like, no, that's not what's happening here.
Well, and it's
And my
it lends
intention,
itself
though,
and it lends itself really well to the development too, because like with Rachel and Elliot, the
yeah.
first book, it's I think it's pretty clear that they have like a brother sister relationship, even though they're not blood related.
Mhm.
It's very much there. And
Yeah,
by
like
the
the
time the
taboo is pushed there.
yeah, and by the time the third book happens, I mean, you know it's there only because you've assumably read the first two books, but
But you see it from Nyx's point of view.
and they're
And from
very much
Nyx's
two
point of view,
separate
it's
entities.
very different.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's a
And so,
nice
like,
development.
in the first book, we have Nyx kind of latching on. She's in this one young hunter's body, and she's like, "Oh, you have like this total taboo attraction thing happening. I'm gonna latch onto that and destroy your life and destroy your sense of self and well-being. I'm
As
just gonna
Nyx does.
absolutely wreck you, right?" Because that's what she loves to do. Centuries of existence is really long. It's boring. She doesn't really get to stay in one place much. So she just loves chaos. If she can mess it up, she gets so much joy out of it. And it's not even necessarily, it's a little bit malicious, but it's mostly like a boredom, and she's working out her boredom for her. And so in the first book, we see more of that Rachel Elliott relationship and Nyx capitalizing on destroying everything she can.
Yeah.
But then by the second book, we come in a little later after the first book has finished, and we see that those two have kind of like sorted out their crap, and they're like, well, that was like, that can't happen again, right? We need to sort our things out. We've got bigger problems, world ending problems is pretty important. And so sometimes Nyx is like, oh, can I push those buttons? But then those buttons have been dealt with, like they're not there to push anymore,
Mhm.
and that kind of irritates Nyx, and she's like, fine, whatever, I'll find some other way to like get into your brain and destroy you. And then by the third book, which is being released on June 29th, through the Owl's Nest if you want to sign up for that launch, or if you can't make it, then it's also available on like, Amazon. But in that book, we see that they've progressed to the point in their relationship, whatever they have, that they're at peace. They're at peace with it. They've dealt with some of their stuff from earlier books, and my intention actually from the beginning of the series was never to have a romantic relationship at all, really, or a relationship. It wasn't supposed to be between Rachel and Elliot. The reader was supposed to infer that it was between Nyx and Rachel, like Nyx in Rachel's body, right?
Oh.
Which kind of carries over and through, but I don't think a lot of readers pick up on that, even though they have like this their own twisted relationship happening. And,
Mm.
and part of that for Nyx is because even though characters like Callie, the 9-year-old, remind her of her little sister, so she feels protective, characters like Rachel remind her of herself, like
Mm.
her past self when she was weak, when she was human, and she hates that. She has like this deep self disgust and self hatred that she doesn't want to recognize because that would be too much for her. But when she sees it projected on somebody else, when she sees that mirrored back to her and Rachel, that makes her hate Rachel even more. So they have this kind of weird thing going on between them where she's working out her own issues, and Rachel is also coming into her own as a young adult. Um, and hopefully that really reaches a satisfying resolution by the very end of the book,
I love how the
end of the
book ends.
series.
Oh my gosh.
But we can't talk about it. I
I
love how
know, I
it
know.
ends.
And I have to say I love that Nyx, the storyline develops too depending on who Nyx inhabits. So for a
Yes.
long period of time she's with Callie, and then for a long period of time she's with Rachel.
Hmm.
And then the third book she's bouncing around, I feel like, a lot more
She
than
does
in the
bounce around
first
a
two
few
books.
times. Yeah.
And she bounces around as necessity dictates.
Hmm.
Um but for quite a while she's with Elliot, and poor Elliot. I love him.
One of the
Stupid
world
Elliot.
building things that I also did in this was that when Nyx is inhabiting the body of someone, she's totally in control of their actions
Yeah.
externally, but they still have an inner life. They still have this rich inner life happening. So she can walk with them through their dreamscapes when they're dreaming. She can manipulate their consciousness to some extent, but they're still in there. They're as active as she wants them to be, basically. But then the flip side of it is that they influence her in ways that she can't always control. And depending on the person, if they're like very, if it's strong, and less able for her to control, or if she's weakened in any way, they can influence her more. And so that tends to come out in the fact that her preferences change. So if she's in someone who's like a vegetarian, then she has no interest in eating meat, right? If she's in a meat eater, then she's like, yes, all the meat all the time. This is the best thing I've ever tasted. And it actually tastes different to her
Mm,
through the senses of different characters.
right.
The same as she sees things, like physically sees things differently through different characters. And an example of that comes up in book 3 is that she's, as you said, often in Rachel or Elliot, but she has to take a little break temporarily and be in Danny's skin, which neither of them are happy about.
Right.
But you do see from that perspective that she, through Danny's eyes, who's the father figure in this, through his eyes, he sees his children who are grown adults. He sees them as children. You know, they're still kids in his eyes. He still needs to protect them. He still sees this like bubble of love around them, but also like they're inexperienced, that he can't necessarily trust them in the field, stuff like that. Whereas when you're back in Elliot's eyes or in Rachel's eyes, that exact same scene or scenario looks very different, depending on the character that Nyx lands in.
Yeah. And I love that you did tailor it to each person, each host
Yeah,
that she's
I tried
inhabiting.
to.
It's
It,
really
it
nice.
really did itself, I guess. Like, I feel like it
It
wrote
lent
itself
itself
and
well.
Nyx dictated it.
Yeah. Yeah, right down to something that I was going to joke about, but I think it's too much of a spoiler, so I won't mention it.
Oh, okay, okay.
Something about Kentucky Fried Pizza guy. But anyway, um that's not giving away anything.
Yeah, it's not. Cannibalism, that's a given.
Oh, and I have to mention, because she's my favorite character, the Abuela. Oh
Abuela.
my gosh. That woman is in book 3 near and dear to my heart, and man,
I'm so glad that you loved her because
I loved her.
for listeners, watchers who don't know, this character is a grandmother, my Spanish grandma, uh, that Nyx kind of accidentally falls into. I don't think that's a big spoiler. She accidentally falls into Abuela, and hijinks ensue, and she's like this crazy cat lady. But from the crazy cat lady's perspective, because Nyx is influenced by it, she's like, I gotta get out of here, but at the same time, I'm gonna pet this cat because I just have this
And it was
compulsion to pet these cats.
but it was so well done, because you have Nyx, who generally, I mean, not all the time, but generally she picks her house based on a certain,
Intentionally, yeah,
and she just kind of gets kicked into this woman.
yeah.
And
She's like,
I mean,
oh no.
it's awful, and it's horrible, and it's awesome for us, because the poor woman's like nearly blind and pretty much
Oh yeah, she's
deaf,
got
and
some
like
bad hips, so
she's got
Nyx is
like
like, I
Alzheimer's or
can't move
something
as
going
fast.
on, so she can't remember anything. And then so Nyx is experiencing that, and it's like fresh hell, but at the same time, it's like kind of nice. So that was my favorite. Oh my gosh.
And I have you to thank for that. You gave me the idea of like Nyx. You were always saying to me a couple years ago, Nyx needs to possess a crazy cat lady.
She
Tasha,
did.
this needs to
She
happen.
really did.
And and now she
It
has.
made my heart happy to see that.
And that was all you. That was thanks to you.
Oh, so all right. my last question, I think, because I haven't been watching time at all. I have no idea how long we've been.
I haven't. I don't think we're doing too bad though.
I have no idea.
30 minutes or so.
My last question, and then we can just whatever. I told you specifically I hate discussing COVID crap because I just hate discussing it in interviews.
Oh yeah, we're all tired.
But I have to say, or I have to ask, what do you think Nyx would do if she was stuck during a pandemic, quarantined? Like, let's make the situation worse. Like, what do you think the worst situation would be for her in a pandemic?
Probably it would be the situation in which I wrote this third book. So, for viewers that aren't aware, during the COVID pandemic, I was in Costa Rica. I traveled there in February of 2020. I think it was February, and then the announcement was made in March. And I'm like, oh, is this bad? Should I be concerned? And I should have been concerned. But I ended up stuck there till I guess I came back November of 2020. So a solid amount of time. And during that time, I wrote the third book of Nyx. Like I had some of it already there that I'd been working out, but I finished it. Thank goodness I needed to. It's been too long. And so that was just me alone for almost the entire time in an apartment, seeing people once in a blue moon when I go down the street to get some groceries, and that was a lot of isolation, even for me, like an ultra introvert.
She started
If
naming
Nyx,
birds and sending us pictures of birds.
I mean, I would have done that anyway. Let's be honest. That's still just me.
Well, I'm kind of surprised you didn't end up with like a dog and a cat, but
I'm kind of surprised too. Like I wasn't alone the entire time. I eventually had neighbors and stuff, which was not as bad. But early on, for sure, and that was a lot of isolation. And let me tell you, Nyx cannot handle being alone.
yeah.
She goes stir crazy. She hates being bored. It is like physically painful, like being lit on fire for her to be bored. She cannot handle it. And she doesn't like to be alone either, which is part of the reason why she inhabits a bunch of people. Like, on the one hand, she has to do it to survive, but on the other hand, she kind of likes it because she doesn't want to be the only voice in her head. You know, she likes that companionship. She doesn't really want to be by herself. So in a pandemic situation, I think she would really lose it, which would be terrible news for her house because she would surely just like jump around constantly trying to get some entertainment because no one can leave. And she would create a lot of chaos wherever she possibly could in whatever way she possibly could.
See, and I always think of it as when I first asked you this question, I thought of it as the worst thing that could probably happen to Nyx would be her inhabiting some mom, like a single mom
With like a bunch of kids to look after.
12 kids.
You have to homeschool them.
Oh, yeah, in a homeschooling situation. Can you imagine? And like internet on the fritz and you know, range from like diaper age to high schoolers. That would be
tough for her.
The
like,
entire household would be massacred.
I feel like she wouldn't massacre the kids because she loves kids. She would probably do her own version of homeschooling, which would be like how to kill someone with Drano. Best ways to use a knife to stab somebody in the throat.
Hey kids, it's physics lesson today. Let's see how far we can catapult mom off the roof. Yeah, it would be.
It would get dark and gory.
I feel like this is a book that needs to happen. Like Nyx COVID edition. I feel like this could be a bestseller. There's all sorts of elements there we could throw in, like
so much you could do.
She doesn't necessarily like not cats, but you know,
yeah.
I don't know.
Like she likes kids, she likes pets and stuff. She kind of hates grown-ups, which is fair enough. Grown-ups are boring, right?
She could be with an immigrant family with like 3 generations worth and then 12 children. That would be fun.
That might keep her more occupied. Hard to say for Nyx. She makes her own fun, really, is what she does.
Yeah.
So she would make her own fun in this, and it would be to the detriment of everyone.
Interesting, though. You should try writing that short story. I feel like that'd be interesting, and I feel like the kids would learn a lot. They may never graduate, but they'd learn a lot.
They surely would. Yeah, for sure. I definitely like Callie learned so much.
Oh my gosh. All these possibilities just floating around in my head now. Oh my god. Oh boy. Well, was there anything else that you wanted to discuss? You have your launch coming up this Tuesday at 7 o'clock through
Yes,
Owl's Nest
yes.
Books.
June 29th, 7 o'clock.
Yep.
If you are on Facebook and follow me, I'm at JJ Reichenbach. That is Reichenbach. Not an easy one. JJ Reichenbach, Nyx, Nix. That's on Facebook. I'm also on Instagram, or I try to be. My website is jjreichenbach.weebly, weebly.com. And on any of those platforms, you can find me, you can follow me, you can attend the launch. There's registration through Owl's Nest Books in Calgary, who is a phenomenal local supporter of indie authors. Like, we cannot thank them enough. Honestly, they do
They're
so much
amazing.
for us. They really are. They are. So
Any
I'm really looking
independent
forward to
bookstore
that.
right now, I just
Tough times, right?
horrible
And
times for them.
still, they have so much resilience and such commitment to their community. I really admire that. And so they're doing the hosting for me. It'll be a virtual launch, so anybody can sign up and attend. And if you want to buy the book on that evening, there's going to be a special price of $20, and you can pick it up from Owl's Nest Books or have it shipped to you, whatever you want. And it'll be for a signed copy. And I think that's all I got. Also, it'll be available on Amazon too if you'd rather just go through Amazon for ebook version or a physical copy.
Sounds good. And you mentioned we're gonna have all sorts of quizzes going on.
Oh yeah, during the launch,
And a
I planned
costume
some
party.
trivia and the costume party. So if you can come and you want to dress up as something scary, have Halloween in end of June, this is your opportunity to do that and be rewarded. We've got some fantastic giveaways, including 3 of your own books, Rebecca, and many other fantastic authors. It's going to be fun, and it's only like an hour, most an hour and a half. So if you can make it, I hope to see you guys there.
It'll be really, really fun. You guys should all try. And really, I mean, especially for all of us introverts, you'd never know it, but I'm a total introvert. I avoid people like the plague typically when I don't have to see them. And it's fantastic, these virtual launches, because once you get past the technical aspect of it, they're really fun. You don't even have to have your microphone
you
and
can
your
leave your
video
mic
on.
off. Like your mic, I think, will be off.
Yeah.
But it's up to you if you want to have your video on or not. If you're
Yeah.
dressed up, then turn it on a little so we can see how awesome you look.
But if you just want to
But
hear
if you just want
everybody
to
and
chill,
just that's
chill out.
okay.
Yeah.
We're happy to
like
not
no
see
pressure,
you.
no stress. Totally fun. It'll be fun. And I'm gonna dress up too. I'm getting my makeup done, so I'm gonna look scary.
Nice. I'm gonna have to try to do some makeup.
Yeah.
My makeup options are a little thin right now, children. So
yeah, it's true.
but I do have a 12-year-old who has recently jumped headfirst into makeup. So I'm fairly confident I could steal
that.
Oh yes, I could steal her entire supply.
I can just imagine.
I might have to do that.
Yeah, just do it. And it's like an hour. I haven't posted this anywhere. I need to post it tomorrow. But the official launch cocktail is a Bloody Mary because of course it is. So get your Bloody Marys prepared. Put on your scary Halloween costumes if you want, and register through Owl's Nest Books, and just show up and have a good time.
And enjoy some demonic possession from the safety of your own home.
Exactly.
Like really, it's the safe way to do demonic possession.
Exactly. You gotta be safe. Yeah.
Exactly. All right. Well, thank you very much for chatting with me tonight.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me, Rebecca.
And I hope to see everybody at the launch. It's going to be fantastic. If you can't make the launch, still check out JJ's books. They are phenomenal. And yeah, they're really great for us twisted folks out there.
Exactly.
They're great for a lot of other people, but if you're not twisted, it could be interesting. So, pull up a Bloody Mary and enjoy a nice read, and there you go. I'll post all the links below, so you guys will be able to get to them really easy. And that's it. Thanks again, and we'll see you guys later.
Thank you.